Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight show, folks. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and I have James Musker in the UK on the line, and I always look forward to our discussions, James. I find them incredibly interesting, so it's great to have you back on the A Minute to Midnight show.
Thanks for having me back, Tony. Great to be back.
I know it's felt like quite a while. It hasn't been that long, but it's been like, it's felt almost overdue, so it's really excellent to have you back again. And I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot. You've sent me some notes and I'm really itching to get into this. So, yep, we're going to be talking mainly about Brexit and what it means and the whole globalist agenda, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. We're going to go through some recent updates on the Brexit situation, and then we'll look at the hidden government's role in all this. And that's what really counts. But of course, no one's talking about it at all. So we'll also look at the origins of the EU and see who's really behind it all.
Yeah, well, you did right, because it's you know, you'll never see that in the newspapers or in the mainstream media, the fact that the hidden government behind all this, and what there actually is a global agenda and a globalist agenda and things. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a bit of an eye-opener for some people. So, yep, let's get into it. Yeah,
well, it's a complicated story, but just so you know straight up, and don't hate me, please, for saying this, but I voted to leave the European Union because I felt it would give the UK a better ability to forge and make its own laws. But to some degree, I think all of us have been wrong-footed by Brexit, both Leavers and Remainers, obviously. And so it's important that we adhere to the will of the people and adhere to what has been decided in the referendum. So I think possibly the only landing zone for Brexit at the moment looks something like the Boris deal that is on the table, although it's really very poor. But it would probably hurt people's jobs to go straight on to WTO rules. And so the hard Brexit option might not be a good one. So
can you just explain what WTO rules is to people that are in America? And other places.
Well, sure. It's the World Trade Organization rules, which basically state that the UK would be immediately straight on to their global trading rules with their tariffs and quotas, etc. But the problem is that it's rather a hard landing, and people will lose their jobs and there'll be redundancies. So I'd like to believe that we could leave with the no deal option. But the more I look at it, the more difficult it seems for the WTO option to be that viable. And of course, we're all getting very grumpy with this subject because it's been going on for 3.5 years. And it's kind of part of the cryptocracy, which is the hidden government. It's part of their entire strategy, really, to divide us up and get us squabbling amongst ourselves. That way they keep us sort of down and out of making inroads on their agenda. So we need the debate to be held in a nicer way than it has been. And I haven't seen that much good-natured debate really on it. There's only been sort of name-calling and lying and manipulation of information. So, yeah. So we'll look at what's happening now. A quick overview, shall we?
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah, we've got the general election coming up on the 12th of December 2019. And you might spot there the 12 and the 12 in December and the 2 plus 1 plus 9. You've got 12, 12, 12, which is 333. I won't go into numerology. My book covers that in quite a major way.
But so you're right. It's an interesting date, the fact that, none of these things are coincidence.
It's extraordinary, but it really is there. You just have to do the research, and if you're doubting, just do the research. You will come out the other side of a very weird rabbit warren. So for some, it seems that the Brexit that we've got on the table is too kind of light. It's keeping us into the EU too much, and for others, it was too strong. And now we've got an extension until the 31st of January 2020. And there's also this flex extension, which means that the UK can go early. They have to pass the withdrawal bill, and that's a vote of Parliament, which it went to its first reading, but then they were worried about last-minute amendments, so Boris Johnson tried to push it through, but he couldn't really because of Gina Miller's ruling, etc. It needed a majority, but in the end, on that big Saturday that we had, they never managed to have the vote because of the Oliver Letwin amendment, which meant they couldn't pass it through. So the problem is that the people, they want to leave, but all the politicians want to remain. And democracy is sort of slightly thrown out of the window. We'll come on to that.
Yeah.
So a general election is now being used as a mechanism to produce a majority which might enable us to leave. But it is a very, very high strategy. And
a high risk strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very. So what is Boris's deal then? We'll look at that. The Boris deal is quite similar to Theresa May's, but the problem of Northern Ireland has been changed. This time there would be custom checks in the Irish Sea for goods going from the UK to Northern Ireland. And so it replaces the backstop, which was the issue with Theresa May's deal. And so the customs union will be out of the customs union. The whole of the UK will leave that at the end of the transition period. But in practical terms, it will be treated as if we were still in the customs union for Northern Ireland. This means that the divide between Northern Ireland and the Irish Sea will be where the customs border is after Brexit. So you've got the single market. Northern Ireland will stay in the EU single market pretty much indefinitely, possibly, to avoid the hard border issue with the Irish Republic and doing away with the need for regulatory checks. And Northern Ireland will also be signed up to the single market regulations. So they'll be part of the single regulatory zone covering the entire island of Ireland. However, they're insisting that customs checks and controls will not have to be carried out at the border or even nearby. So in this respect, there would be the Stormont Lock, which would enable the Northern Ireland devolved government to vote every 4 years to set the customs arrangements they want. The DUP have rejected this since, in their view, it puts an unacceptable divide between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. But, you know, in the long term, the problem is that it may create the United Kingdom sort of the start of it splitting up, which has been a real fear from outset, that we'd have Scotland going their separate way. They don't like Westminster, etc. And now we have Northern Ireland, who could be made by the EU to divide off and go it alone.
So just out of interest, what is the general feeling about Brexit then from those other countries in the UK? Do they want to leave or do they want to stay, like Wales, Scotland, Southern Ireland, Northern Ireland? What you know, I'm not really sure.
Well, Scotland voted very strongly to remain, and Nicola Sturgeon and others have stated that they want to be an independent nation within the EU. Obviously, it doesn't exist. And Northern Ireland, they voted to leave, but basically the DUP, Northern Ireland, the history of it is that they can't revoke, they can't create a hard border because it contravenes the Good Friday Agreement. So Wales, they're more in the leave camp. So you've got Scotland, they desperately want to leave. You've got Northern Ireland, which are being pushed out slightly by the EU. So, yeah.
It's interesting.
It's very, very complicated, I have to tell.
I'd say.
Yeah. So the hard Brexiteers, they don't really like the deal that's on the table because during the withdrawal agreements, extendable transition period, which I think we have to have that because otherwise businesses aren't going to know what on earth's going on. But for those true Brexiteers, this transition period would last, probably for 3 years, and almost certainly probably longer, and we'd be trapped in the EU customs union, subject to all their existing laws and any punitive ones that they might pass, and we'd still be under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice as well. And there's also a sneaky little crafty lock-in, lock-in's not the right word, it's sort of a clause there that is there that any future trade deals outside of the EU, they must be according to a level playing field. So it means even sticking to the EU rules there. So the no deal version, I think, is possibly too severe, since it locks us. It's not the transition period, and the WTO rules take too long to set up. But we could try, and being outside of the customs union could also cause us to foul up on services. For example, this is a big issue. The UK exports services more than anything else, really: financial, business, legal, accountancy, etc. And those exports to the UK are worth about £90 billion last year. So once we're out of the EU, these services will become harsher and more expensive to transact. And so therefore, we probably do need an orderly exit. In the current Boris Johnson deal that is kind of going through, that orderly exit is there. But in the Nigel Farage version of the Brexit, it isn't really there, because they don't like the deal. Theresa May did also have the single market, the Canada sort of deal, which was proposed by Donald Tusk, but she foolishly rejected it. So that was a bit of a mistake, I think. But during the transition period, EU rules would apply. But I think that we should probably just keep negotiating and see what we can come up with. It's not acceptable, really, the current deal that they've got. There's not acceptable, the no deal. But eventually, I believe the UK will find a way ahead with all of this. And I'll come on to why I think the kleptocracy's hidden hand behind it all is kind of pushing us out. And hopefully we'll look back in 10 years' time and think, thank God we didn't stay. We'll be thinking possibly exactly the same way we've done when we didn't join the euro. Joining the euro has been a bit of a disaster for most of Europe. It's inflicted massive suffering. The exports and imports, the whole thing. You can't set your own interest rate policy, and it helps Germany, but the rest, in particular the southern European countries, it severely hinders them. And I would argue, and I put in the book, that this has been done on purpose to make those countries weak so that they will sign up to the EU project. And of course, keeping the economy weak makes it easier for the EU to steal sovereignty. So eventually, I believe we will find that we've made the right choice, and we will see Europe flounder, because their version of socialist technocracy will never work in the medium or the long term. It's just one step too far removed from the world market. So, just going back to Nigel Farage's deal then. His version of Brexit is more a clean break, the no deal option, whereby divergence on standards and rights would come into effect straight away. So there wouldn't be any transition period. And he believes that we've kind of been taken hostage by the EU, and that it is possible that we'll never leave because the EU can't be trusted, and they'll just keep on pushing the can further and further down the road. So with no new trade agreement with the EU and being locked into their rules, the rules of the World Trade Organization, which we'd hoped to go into, they may never even materialize. So I think possibly we do need a transition period. Boris Johnson is about the only one that we can get onto, and that if there isn't going to be a free trade agreement, we would remain aligned with EU rules, because they've stated that it has to be a level playing field. So at the end of the day, though, it all depends on what the cryptocracy want, the hidden government. They have almost complete power over what's going on. It's the hidden government that really, it's their view that really counts. And they have their multi-agenda that they always eventually fulfill. And they work to a multi-generational scheme, father to son, handing down wealth through the generations. But of course, no one kind of believes it. So it's a very clever strategy.
Yeah, right. We're just called tinfoil hat wearers.
Yeah, it's just a source of ridicule, really, because we're so conditioned to believe that there isn't a secret elite. But once you know they're there, you just see them all over the place. I mean, George Soros, for example, with him funding the Remain camp and trying to keep us in there and slightly punish us and all of this. And then, of course, you've got all the Remainers who have thwarted the Leavers, the 52% versus 48. So just a quick recap on the history of Brexit then, Tony. The referendum was held on the Thursday, the 23rd of June, 2016. There's a bit of a 9/11 code on that for numerology, if you're interested. David Cameron, he called it because he wanted to keep basically the UKIP party, the UK Independence Party, at bay. And even though that there were polls that had been conducted in the years ahead that showed that with an in-out referendum vote, that it would be a very, very close call indeed. Those polls were done in 2009, but still on the ballot box, they had the paper, ballot box paper, they had the question, should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union, or should it leave the European Union? So the boxes were remain a member of the EU, leave the EU. Obviously, as you know, leave won by 52 to 48%. The referendum turnout was extremely high at 72%. More than 30 million people voted. And obviously 17.4 million people voted to leave. This was the largest number of people who have ever voted in British political history. The previous time was John Major's election in 1992. He had 14.1 million people.
Wow.
But oddly, John Major didn't seem to object to the tyranny of that minority on that occasion. So, and of course, after this, the 500 members of Parliament, they all promised to adhere to the result. But we still haven't left the EU. So it's all really a bit of a fiasco. We've been doing this for 3.5 years.
Yeah, I've even heard people calling saying we need to have a referendum again. I mean, it's just crazy.
That's right. That's right. But, when you've got all the establishment stating that they would not ask for a second referendum, and you've got Theresa May saying Brexit means Brexit, it's not very democratic to do that. And of course, being a Brexiteer, I would say that. But I think you have to be true to yourself. And, if everyone agrees upon a course of action and it's put into law, this is what we're going to do. I don't think it's good for the Liberal Democrats, or some people have called them the illiberal bureaucrats. You heard that one? Yeah, to do that. I mean, you might be a Liberal Democrat supporter, but it's not good to turn back the clock and say, well, we'll just forget about that referendum deal, because that's not democratic. Once you throw away democracy, there are all sorts of other tyrannies at the door and problems. So
has the Fabian Society actually come out and said anything as a society? Do you know?
No, I don't know about that. But Oliver Letwin, he's a Fabianist. Although he's a conservative, he kind of put the spanner majorly on that big Saturday date when they were going to vote on the Boris Johnson deal. He put rushed through his amendment, which got signed off by John Bercow. So another bit of a fiasco. But of course, the Fabianists, people on the left, they tend to trust the government. They quite like big government, whereas people on the right, they don't like government. They think that the government's going to take them to odd places. So unfortunately, a lot of this argument has become framed in left and right political terms. And that's a real problem. And I'll come on to why suddenly it dawned upon me that, well, I'll mention it now, that if we do leave, that will kind of indicate that the right were correct all along. And the problem with that is that they want to keep us on the kind of left agenda. Although it is technocracy we're going into, they, most people on the left think that they're going to go into their socialist utopian sort of society. So it all kind of went wrong in many ways, the whole Brexit thing, because the will of the majority wasn't adhered to. And so the deal was declined 3 times in November 2018. And today we've got a very poor deal on the table, and the politicians have shown themselves to be basically waiting, as far as I know, waiting for orders from the hidden government on what to do. Yeah, they're waiting around. What should we do with this? Oh, come and help us out. And they're not doing it. So there is an element of that this is a psyop, possibly to divide us up. And I'll come on to that in a bit. But it was a terrible shock to the establishment that Leave Vote was there, and it's possibly the case that the ruling classes of Britain were the only group to overwhelmingly vote to stay in the European Union and to keep on doing that. So it's a question of sovereignty as well. And they did a lousy job, Remain, really, of selling to the people why they wanted to stay in the EU. In many ways, perhaps, being fair, they should have won the argument. But this is their problem, that they never could, because they failed to answer the all-important question. And that is, why has the EU been diluting our sovereignty? And how and why do we need the same laws to trade? Because that's why we need these laws, is that we need divergence, non-divergence on goods and services need to be the same. It's a level playing field, movement of people, all of those 3 pillars that they have. But Remain never answered that question. They just harped on about the economy and doom and gloom and losing jobs. And they couldn't seem to understand that some people, they were happy, well, not happy, but they were willing to take a hit with their job and lose their job because they hated the EU so much, and that and that Remain, they sent the official Remain camp, David Cameron, the Conservatives, they sent out pamphlets to everyone's household stating that they felt that we should remain in the EU. That was a flawed policy, I think, because if someone tells you to do something, you might well do the opposite.
Yeah.
They said, oh, yeah, so... and the cryptocracy, they knew that. They're the masters of telling us something. I now want you to think of anything but a yellow car. Of course, you're thinking of a yellow car, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In which case, it's quite highly likely that this was done deliberately to create chaos and division, as you've mentioned earlier. That's part of the whole plan, which is, of course, the same plan that's playing out in other places at the moment as well. You're seeing it in the United States, the division and the chaos there, and you're seeing it even in Israel with the elections, that they haven't been able to make a government as well. So far it seems to be a common sort of thread.
Yes, there really is. And the election of Donald Trump in November 2016 was almost an exact sort of replay of the Brexit issue, whereby the sort of establishment and the media and the academics, they just couldn't understand what had happened, and they refused to accept the will of the people. And you know what? Even Machiavelli said that he would respect democracy, even the great Machiavelli. So he thought that the will of the people should be adhered to, and that very seldom did the will of the people get things wrong. He didn't believe in the tyranny of the will of the people. So for me, you either adhere to democracy or you kind of get out of the debate. Just, you don't do what these politicians have been doing. And in my view, if Brexit does not happen, and if we have a second referendum, it means that the UK is not a democratically run country. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it is not acceptable for the will of the people to be stopped like this. And democracy only works if the losers to a vote consent to it. So the people who lose the vote have to say, OK, well, I don't like it, but I'm putting my hands up. That's it. I consent to this. Because as soon as you treat democracy as some sort of selective privilege that can be manipulated and changed, rather than a universal right to be demanded, your own rights and freedom are really at risk. And this is what you're seeing. People who are desperate to go into a second referendum, which I think is not acceptable. I mean, if they had another referendum, do you want to have a second referendum? That would be fair, because in that first referendum, we'd be saying, yes, OK, first referendum we'll get rid of. Now we're going to go forward. It's like setting a law, or, so this is where we've arrived at with the Remainer politicians.
Yeah, well, it's almost like saying, well, we haven't been able to do a Brexit deal yet, so perhaps people, you might want to vote again and say no, then we don't have to go through all this. So let's give you a second referendum because you had enough, you're tired. Yes. It's like, come on. So what would your thoughts be on the outcome of the election? Well,
it's very, very difficult to know, and I don't want to make too many forecasts because it's very tricky. But there are surely three main outcomes. You've got one, a Conservative majority. You've got two, a Labour majority, or you've got a hung Parliament. Obviously, there are lots of different other ones, but those are the three main. A Conservative majority, perhaps with a DUP included, they would be hopefully able to get it through and help. They do need about 326 people, but right now, on the 4th of November, this is looking, I would say, unlikely, unless he did a deal with Farage. So I think the Conservatives, possibly over the last few days, have made a big mistake not to take that offer, although it would set a new precedent, I suppose. But with the Labour majority and the hung Parliament option, both of those might include the Liberal Democrats. Both of those options, those outcomes, there would be the second referendum option on the table. So there's a 2 in 3 chance that it will go to a second referendum. But personally, I think a second referendum is not really acceptable, as I've mentioned before. But yeah, we will see what happens. And of course, it's nothing really to do with the will of the people anyway. It's to do with the hidden government. So, yeah.
What about a hung Parliament situation?
Well, yeah, the Labour would get together with the Liberal Democrats maybe, and they would then, they've stated, Labour, that they want a second referendum, and the Liberal Democrats have also stated outright that they want a second referendum. So it would be leave with a deal here or remain. And I don't know, I haven't seen the statistics on what they think would happen in that scenario, but probably we're never going to leave the EU. So it's not what we think and the politicians think and do that counts. It's what the hidden government does.
Yeah, it's like they've pushed it on to the stage where there is another coinciding with another election. This should have been done and sorted long before now, but it hasn't been.
Yes. The deals that Theresa May were in the camp more of remain actually than leave, if you think about it, because we would have been very heavily linked in with the EU. So all of this is a slight contrivance, really. Politics is a contrivance. Yeah. I would argue that it is something to do with the deep state. It's a caricature for the newspapers and the mainstream media. And I know that that can get you in real problems with people. But, you know, what they tell us that's going on is not quite what really is going on. And this is because there's a filter on information which we receive. And that filter starts right at the top. They're hiding things. Maybe it's nothing conspiratorial, but the information is slightly agended to fit in with what the elite's agenda is. More often than not, we're being led up the garden path to believe and think something that's completely incorrect. We're misled with disinformation, misdirection to sell us an idea or make us think that an idea is our own thought. This is how the deep state works. And a classic example is Donald Trump, that lots and lots of people really, really do genuinely hate him. And it's never occurred to them to think that, oh, maybe it's newspapers and the TV that's been creating that sort of thought in my mind. No, they really, really do hate his policies and everything about him.
Oh, honestly, it's yeah. And it's even I just a couple of days ago here in New Zealand, one of our main sort of rags, it's called The Listener, and the front cover is basically, I can't remember, I haven't got it in front of me now, but it's like how to get rid of an out of control president.
Yeah,
you know, this is a New Zealand paper. What on earth is New Zealand worrying about that? I'm more concerned with how do we get rid of an out of control prime minister that we've got.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's to destroy the political establishment. Remember the Freemasonry maxim, order ab chao, order out of chaos.
Yes.
And so they have to, so this is destroying the president's the office and reducing democracy so that they can slowly acclimatize us to the new world order. And a lot of these political goings on, we can sort of see the fog slowly clearing. And Brexit's quite an interesting one because it's taken us so long to really spot what's going on, because it's been blocked so many times. It's a little bit not like 9/11 for me personally anyway, where I slowly came to the conclusion that something really quite horrific had actually happened and our governments were involved from the top to the bottom. And so Brexit, I'm slowly coming to the conclusion that it is another illusion. We possibly will not be leaving the EU with anything that really looks like Brexit at all. Will be half in, half out, and we'll never be able to break free from the technocratic, non-democratic system that is the EU. And so we've got big capital in the background, and that's possibly a reason why we are leaving, which we'll come onto in a moment. And I don't want to be too fatalistic and say that the hidden government control 100%, because they don't. Sometimes laws are brought in that get through from the grassroots level, and they affect government and bring in proper laws, but those aren't major issues. And so the whole democratic law creating procedure is a carefully constructed scam, really, to keep power in their hands, the hidden government's hands, with the politicians running around like puppets doing what they want.
Yep, and that's definitely all over the place. I can see it here big time in New Zealand. It's really just so obvious with the government that we shouldn't even have, because they weren't even the majority government, a bunch of coalition minor parties and things cobbled together a coalition to beat the party that had the most votes and form a government which is basically just puppet government for the United Nations and for socialism, big time. It's just, it's so plain to see. Anyway,
really? Yes. I was thinking the same thing. It's plain to see. This is part of what they want us to sort of believe, that as the sort of onion rings of rottenness are peeled away, we can see more and more rottenness down below, and that's part of it. If Brexit had gone through, everyone would be going, "Oh, but democracy does work. It's a good thing. Everything's going forward." But the that's part of their system. So
that is very, very interesting point of view, that to say that, and that they're doing this to really to destroy democracy, so people get sick of it and go, this doesn't work, because it's happening in so many places. And even well, America's not a democracy; it's a republic, but you've still got the same thing happening there as well, with the whole hate Trump on one side and love Trump to death on the other side. Yeah, the polarization is just so immense. So then you get people trying to, impeach Donald Trump so they can overthrow that, and then the ones on the other side are saying, well, you're just destroying any sort of democratic vote if you do that. And it's just happening in so many places. So it's probably not an accident.
Yes. It isn't an accident. They're all in this together, right at the very top, the 0.01%, the richest families, and the EU, the development and the real history of the EU. Also, you can see the hidden government there straight away. Of course you can. They set up the EU. So before the World War II, there was talk amongst the elite about a Franco-British Union, which was a plan put forward by Arnold Toynbee, and it was eagerly adopted by Churchill, but frustrated obviously by Germany's invasion of France in World War II. But after World War II, Germany was basically run by the Americans under the Marshall Plan via the OEEC. And so the EU was not really a creation of Germany or France. It was really a creation of the British and the American, the Anglo-American establishment, as Carroll Quigley calls it. So they pushed Jean Monnet forward. He had close links to London and was not involved in European integration until early in 1950. But the previous 2 years, under the Marshall Plan, they had basically been pushing forward this version of the EU. I mean, that's a big statement, but the various councils, the Council of Europe, there was the Hague meeting in May 1948, and that called for a united Europe. And Joseph Rettinger, Bilderberger, was the first Secretary General, and he was bankrolled by David Astor, son of one of the leading Milner Group not original, but later on members, Lord Astor. The Council of Europe was founded on May the 5th, 1949. Spot the numerology there, 33. With the Treaty of London. Yeah, Treaty of London. 10 you don't drop the zero in that one. The Council of Europe was based in Strasbourg and was originally a British invention, believe it or not. Monnet worked on the Franco-German plan in complete secrecy without the French government even knowing about it, but he was really a front man for the Anglo-American interests of the international bankers. But this embryonic form of the EU at outset was a American-British one. And so the financial interests really behind the EU are the Milner Group of the secret elite, who are the same people within the Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the CFR, the big international bankers and corporates, the Brown, Shipley and Co. of London, the Rothschilds Group, Lazard interests, and in the US, you've got the Rockefellers and the JP Morgan groups who dominated and still do the CFR, the CIA, and the US State Department. So in those days also there were the wise men added in, such as Averell Harriman and John McCloy. So
is it possible then that the ultimate goal is a uniting between the UK and the US?
Correct. Absolutely correct. And we can see that in some of the writings of Carroll Quigley, that Carroll Quigley, just a very quick introduction. He had access to the papers of the Council of Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute of International Affairs. He was given access for 2 years to look at them, and he wrote two extremely important books, Tragedy and Hope and The Anglo-American Establishment, which cover off the history of the Cecil Rhodes Group, which coalesced basically the Eastern establishment, so the big robber barons of the 1880s to the 1930s. They all got together and basically went forward with this idea of taking over political establishments for themselves and for the British Empire, was the original idea of Cecil Rhodes. He died in 1900 and 1901, and the whole thing was taken forward by Lord Milner, Alfred Milner. And so he wrote in his book on page 1282 about the EU. Such a solution of the EU basically requires that Britain accept the fact that it is, since the invention of the airplane and the rocket, a European and not a world or even an Atlantic power. This the leaders of Britain and the American branch of the British establishment have been unwilling to accept. As a consequence, Britain remains aloof from the continent, committed to the Atlantic community and to the Commonwealth of Nations, and accordingly, the political unification of Western Europe stands suspended partway to fulfillment while the German problem is dealt with. So there he's saying that Britain is an Atlantic power, and elsewhere we've got a bit more here. But de Gaulle will accept Britain into a West European federation only if Britain becomes clearly a European power and renounces its special relationship of close collaboration with the United States, and if it is also willing to subordinate its position as leader of the British Commonwealth of Nations to its membership in the European system. The abandonment of its special relationship with the United States and with the Commonwealth, the two major concerns of the English establishment for more than 40 years, was too heavy a price to pay for membership in the European Economic Community and would have been an unacceptable reversal of established policy. So, there are one or two others where he's stating that Britain is an Atlantic power, not a European one.
So who wrote that again, just in case the listeners missed it?
Yeah, it's Carroll Quigley. He was an American historian, and he wrote that book in 1966. The Hidden Establishment quashed it until 1981 when it came out, and it's basically a history of the world.
Basically, Carroll Quigley was an Illuminati insider, really, wasn't he?
Correct. Absolutely. He was given full access. He thought they were doing a good job, and he didn't mind. What he didn't like was the fact that it was a secret, and he felt that it would be best if people knew about it because they were a harmless group, sort of. That's sort of the approach. But some of the policies he didn't like, one of them that he didn't like was the fact that he thought that the Illuminati thought that Britain should be with America and not with Europe. He didn't like that idea. So if you're doubting that what I'm saying is correct, and it's not me, it's Carroll Quigley and others, you could. There's a very interesting link here with the Atlantic Brucher, which is the secret club that Angela Merkel is a member of. And that aims to promote German-American understanding and Atlanticism. It was set up in 1952 by the secret establishment under the Rockefellers, John McCloy, and the CFI, the same group. So it's been, I think, the strategy all along to take us out of the EU, to get us in so that all the other countries would join in, and then eventually to get us out so that it would even up the blocks, for one thing, but also because it would even up the block so America and the UK would be together, and Europe and eventually Russia, believe it or not, would also join in. The Russian connection was mentioned by the head of the Ford Foundation, Norman Dodd, mentioned that the eventual aim of the Cold War was for Russia to join with America. That's what he said. I mean, whether that's true or not, but it is possible. So this is geopolitical positioning, is what's going on here. And so from Americans' point of view, they want to strengthen their position with the UK, and they know that the long-term plan is for the ultimate recovery of the United States, which is a statement from Cecil Rhodes's will, which I mentioned on page 85 of the book. And so this is why we're leaving the EU. It's global positioning for the rollout of the New World Order. And something else, if you look at the map of George Orwell's 1984 book, you've got Oceania and you've got Europe and the undisputed areas. But you will notice that the UK is not federated to Europe, but to Oceania, which contains America. Yeah. And so, yeah, George Orwell was actually an insider. Yep. He wasn't a he was an insider. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I covered a little bit of that recently in another video with both George Orwell and Aldous Huxley were both members of the Fabian Society, British Fabian Society, and so on, and very much, and of course, very close friends, and that. So again, it just, there's no coincidences. It's, as you've said so many times, it's a plan playing out here. Yes,
that's right. And we can see that plan, although some people still seem to struggle with it, which I find a bit alarming. And Brexit is kind of confirmation for how alarming it all really is, because people still can't seem to work out that the EU is actually an instrument of quite bad things, which we'll come on to in a moment. So the next thing I'd like to cover fairly briefly is the Corporation of London, because this is a massive financial centre in the City of London. As you know, it's not quite the City of London. It's different from the larger Greater London municipality, so it's not to be confused with that. The City of London has carved out for itself a political domain that lies to a degree outside the laws and democratic institutions of the rest of Britain. Basically, it's a tax haven in the middle of London, from which a vast global network of offshore havens and international companies and secret jurisdictions emerge like spiders' webs. There are three main layers. You've got the British Crown dependencies, which are Jersey, Guernsey, and the Isle of Man. And then you've got overseas territories, which are kind of the last surviving areas of Britain's formal empire, the Cayman Islands, for example, BVI, British Virgin Islands, Turks and Caicos, and Gibraltar. And so these areas form a massive money laundering network, and the center of which is the city. They're doing the deals, but they're placing it slightly in the hands of others elsewhere. And the problem with these types of tax havens is that they're not really accountable to anyone. In fact, the Corporation of London even has its own seat in the Houses of Parliament. You've got the Remembrancer, who sits opposite the Speaker, and it's his job to make sure that parliaments do not remove any concessions which Parliament has given them over the years. So these concessions might be to do with hedge fund rules or taxation. As soon as these start to happen, the Remembrancer is there. It goes back to Henry VIII when he started to steal all of their armour and their plate. They decided to gain a concession within the government, and they put this Remembrancer there, he's not democratically elected. And so he's there to make sure that the cities, the tax haven city, their rules are adhered to. So the EU, we know, has an eye on this, and they've already said that they plan to clamp down on UK offshore havens, and so they'll seek to get rid of the city. So that's good, isn't it? The EU is seeking to get rid of the of the tax haven of the city. Surely that's a good thing. Well, this could be a reason why we're leaving. So it's not very fair, a tax haven, because it means other people have to pay more tax. And why would the secret elite want this smashed up? So that they don't want it smashed up, and that's one reason why we're leaving. Those deep trusts that they have, although some of them are flea trusts, they can quickly move and change directors in offshore locations without any problem. But obviously there's something there, I believe, that they don't want the EU to know about. They don't want us to know about. So maybe when we are out of the EU, this is the next thing that we need to regulate. And this goes back to the fact that probably we do need a written constitution, because we can't have referendums being voted on and agreed on and then suddenly, oh no, we don't want that. So so the elite, they want to remove themselves from EU regulations whilst at the same time maintain economic ties to the EU. So it's exactly the type of Brexit they wanted is what we will get. And how crazy of us and stupid of us to have even considered that we would get some kind of amazing people's vote clean break. No, it's all, Farage, he's an idealist, isn't he? In the cryptocracy, they love idealists. They open up doors for them, swing them this way, swing them that way. But, when they thwart them here, thwart them there, release that bit of information here, it's managed. And we can see that with George Soros, he's funding Remain and everything else. All the Remain politicians have been blocking it. And so it's about dividing us up. And the cryptocracy don't want us to be in agreement with anything, really. So the more they can divide us up, annoy us, agitate us, spin us, the greater the power they basically receive over us. And we can't even begin to make any inroads in sorting out the problems. So that's reason 3, is to divide us up. So I don't think we should be that angry about the way that the whole EU thing has gone. I think we just need to be more pleasant to each other, certainly. It's more a question of acknowledging that we've all been manipulated. So those who voted to remain, to stay in the EU, they've got really annoyed because they don't want leave to happen. And those people who voted leave, they've got really annoyed because it hasn't happened. Yeah. So it's kind of
classic Hegelian dialectic, isn't it?
Exactly, Tone. Exactly, the Hegelian dialect. Yeah. So it's to destroy democracy and take us into their technocratic system, which was spoken above by Zbigniew Brzezinski. So I'm going to read a quick quote, shall I, from Zbigniew Brzezinski?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, he said, the technotronic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be denominated by an elite, unrestrained by traditional values. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval review by the authorities.
Wow. And that was written...
Yeah.
When was that written?
1969.
And doesn't that just show you, see, this whole thing now, they've got the technology to do it, which they did not have then. So they've strung this whole thing along all the time, till now they've got the technology to do that very thing that he was saying they wanted to do.
Exactly. Unrestrained by traditional values. Well, one traditional value is democracy, isn't it? Yeah. Let's knock that one down. Oh, we've got a good strategy here. Let's go with that. That's the way that these people are thinking. They're not evil on purpose 100%. They believe that this is the right route for humanity. They don't care if they trample over democracy and Plato and Christianity and what's going on from years before. They will just continue because they really do fundamentally believe that that's their right. This is the way things are doing. We're going to bulldoze the whole of society into this area. And look at China. I mean, it's just a surveillance state now, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, 660 million cameras, I think it is, that they want to have in China by next year.
Yes.
660 million cameras. I mean, can you even imagine that number? And they want to be able to identify every person within 3 seconds.
Yes. One camera for every 2 people. Yeah.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah.
It's terrifying the way that things are going there with this social credit score system that they're rolling out. And there's a very good article actually on Wikipedia. Don't believe everything there, obviously, but social credit system it's called. And you can see there that they've already denied 17.5 million flights to prospective travelers who were on their blacklist. 70. I thought it was just a few, and it has only been, it's really happening fast, and we can see a lot of censorship there. And so this is the direction that they want everything to go in. Is the EU going to go there first? Of course they are. I mean, we've got an awful lot of surveillance cameras as well in the UK, and we've got a very strong social credit score system to do with debt, and that is quite easy to amend to becoming a social credit score. But I don't think we've been missold by the sort of media long term. This is about what the EU is and what it's becoming. Lots of Remainers, and this is a bit of a dig against them, but they seem to believe that the EU is a democratic institution which is going places and it'll sort out the socialist utopian future. I can tell you quite emphatically that that is not the direction that the EU is going in, and that probably 10 years from now, the EU will be like China. It'll be a complete police state and total technocracy everywhere, where the energy, you get possibly even as far advanced as social credits and an income that's paid by them to keep things all going. So it's not pure socialism, it's technocracy. And this is what SMART is, smart technology. It stands for System Monitoring and Reporting Technology. Everyone will have in their house smart electricity and gas, etc. Meaning, of course, that we are all going to be monitored and reported on in our own homes.
Yes, James, why are you using that much electricity this week?
Well, I had my underfloor heating on or whatever. It's terrible. But of course, if I was trying to get a flight later on, they might stop me. Sorry, you can't go there. You're getting on a train,
Yes.
And so it's the new world order. It's in the pipeline. We can see it. It's the rule of the expert. There won't be any real politicians representing us in government, as there isn't now, really. It's a joke, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a joke.
Yeah. There'll be yeah.
I mean, you can see a combination of George Orwell's book and Aldous Huxley's book. That's what we've actually got. Well, that's what's coming. Yes. It was like two sides of the coin.
Yes. Yeah, both of them, from the left, it's not really socialism that we're going into. It's the slow creep of the socialist agenda, which is being swung over into the economic technocratic society. So they'll control all resources and consumption, and even seeds like Monsanto, so that they can control food production, water, everything. And if you're not adhering to their what they want, then they'll cut you out. So it's a brilliant way of stopping freedom of speech. You'll still be allowed to say things, but guess what? You'll just be sort of down and out in society. So shut up, because you won't be allowed to fly next week or get on that train, or you'll lose your job, or you'll have X number of amount deducted out of your digital currency that you'll have at that point. Yes. And so when tyranny does arrive in the EU, it's not for me to say, but we're not going to be bailing them out. We've done it twice or 5 times, I think, historically. When in World War I and II, I wasn't there, but obviously, you know what I'm saying. We're not. The debate on Brexit it needs to go forward, and I think we need everyone to be a bit more honest and a bit more transparent. This is the kind of conclusion. We can't have that much spin and lies and disinformation anymore in this area. If we're going to recover and go forward, we need to maybe be a bit slower at taking offense and getting insulted about what we're saying, and a bit quicker at forgiving each other and having a laugh about it. And this is what I think we need to do next, and acknowledge that probably the best people to govern the people of Britain are the people of Britain through the ballot box as a nation. What's wrong with that? The best people to govern Britain are the people of Britain, not people in the EU. And I know you see the Milner group, the cryptocracy, they're really cosmopolitan. They're not nationalistic. But I'm not nationalistic either, but I do believe in democracy and that the people of Britain are the best people to make their choice. Don't give it away. And especially don't give it away for nothing, which is what we're getting with the current deal on the table. We're basically tied in still. But I don't think the no deal is going to work either. So there we go.
Well, in the end, I guess it comes down to what's happening more and more is the fact that rather than governments serving the people, we have people serving the governments. And that is, and of course those governments are beholden to that technocratic elite that you were talking about. A brilliant discussion, James. Can you just give our listeners that book of yours, which I've told people they should get before, and if they haven't got it, I would recommend it again.
Yeah, sure, Tony. It's called The New World Religion and the Beliefs of the Elite, and it's available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback format. And please do buy it. It covers a lot of these sorts of issues, and particularly the religious aspect. So I hope you'll enjoy reading that and learn a lot from it.
It's a great reference book. Even after having read the book, it's a great place to just refer back to because there's so much great information in it. Highly recommend it. So thank you so much, James. It's been another great discussion, and we'll have to have you back again before too long.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you so much then, Tony. God bless.
God bless you too. And folks, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so, and share the video. And also, of course, you can find it on iTunes as well, and on our website, aminutomidnight.com. We all put all of our shows on all of those places, YouTube, iTunes, and directly on our website. Visit aminutomidnight.com, and if you want to donate to us, you can as well. We run 100% by donations, and I'm very grateful to the people that do donate to keep this running. So one last thing, the music I've written, played and recorded, and you can download that if you want on the website too. And we do have a forum there if you want to join that as well. So folks, thanks for listening, and we'll be back in a few days' time with another episode of the A Minute to Midnight Show. Until then, God bless and have a great week.